Right. Hi, everyone. Get yourself comfortable. First of all, thank you very much for joining us. My name is Maria Villablanca, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session, where we're going to be talking about tech and human and how we drive forward the procurement function. So this is an interesting conversation and very relevant, and I'm joined by my guests who are going to do a bit of an introduction themselves as well. I'm joined by Luca, Prerna, and Ralf, and they're going to introduce themselves, but also we have Slido. So if you do have a question, and we'll hopefully take some questions at the end of this, please use the Slido app so that way we can get to your question quickly. Right. Why don't we start this way? Luca, do you want to maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your journey, and then we go on that way, and I'll get to my first question.
Thank you, Maria. So my name is Luca. I work for ING Bank. I'm globally responsible for policy, process, and risk. So my role is ultimately keep the bank safe when we conduct procurement activities in compliance with external regulation and as much as possible efficient and effective.
As much as possible efficient, yes, I hope so. Prerna, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thanks, Maria. Hi, everybody. My name is Prerna Dhawan. I'm the Chief Solutions Officer at the Smart Cube, and I'm responsible for all our intelligence analytics, product solutions, and now also digital enablers from Denali. All my experience has really been helping organizations embed intelligence and analytics as a way of life. So very excited to be here today.
Thank you, Prerna. Ralf?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Ralf. I work for Johnson & Johnson. At Johnson & Johnson, we have two businesses. So I work in the medtech business, so medical devices, and I lead the global direct procurement team. You can think about the business as roughly a $30 billion business, and the direct spend behind is roughly $3 billion, with a lot of complexity for sure. And throughout my career, I've worked mainly in procurement, direct, also a bit of indirect, and supply chain roles.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I want to start off by talking about problems, if that's okay. We've been seeing a lot of facts and figures thrown about, especially about transformation failures. So maybe we start by talking a little bit about the challenges, whether they are internal or that you've been seeing in the market around you, with regards to any kind of transformation strategies that have been a challenge for you all. So maybe we start with you, Luca?
Yeah, thank you, Maria, for the question. I think it was to spend a few words why we are talking about AI and AI adoption first, if I may. So I think I like to translate AI with two words. One is augmentation and one is impact, because I think it really gives the sense of what we are talking about. And when I say augmentation, I mean enhance people's capabilities to become more efficient, which means doing things more efficiently, agile, so adapt and moving faster, focused, which means stop doing certain things and be really focused on the important things. And lastly, accurate, so taking better decisions. So I think that AI has impact, because ultimately what we are talking about is in creating an impact in the business we are conducting, so which is ultimately the objective of any digital transformation. So I think the AI will allow procurement to ultimately create the bandwidth to take a more strategic role in the organization and left behind operational activities that we expect to be replaced by the artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. Now, if we want to try to envision and achieve this objective, we are certainly have some challenges. Yeah. And I like to mention three of them. The first one is related to the people dimension. Yeah. So if we take the idea that the AI will allow us to do more things with less, so we need equally to accept the idea that there will be tasks that we will stop doing. Yeah. A new one will come equally. So this immediately creates a link to the fact that we need to upskill and reskill our resource, and even more inject capabilities that today we don't have in our procurement teams. So to give some example, when I look, for example, at procure-to-pay process, I do expect that operational activity will be taken by the AI, while procurement will be more involved in supervising activities or training the AI to make sure that the outcome remain fair and as expected. Or when I look at third-party risk management equally, I think that the large data set that we have the ability to analyze and to get insight will be push procurement to have certain skill within the team in terms of data modeling, etc. That today we don't see frequently in the team. So I think that if we want to address this challenge, every company that really want to take a journey towards AI adoption should start working in creating really an AI-driven workforce spread across the organization. So that's my first observation. The second challenge that I do see is related to the fact that we see an increasing pressure in conducting digital transformation in a short time of period. So from one side, we are all facing challenges in reviewing the budget and the planning every 3 months. On the other side, if we want to take seriously AI adoption, which is not about implementing software, is really conducting a digital transformation, we need to have long-term planning and investment. We need to make sure that we have a proper infrastructure and security layer, large data set, and all this is conflicting a little bit with the environment we are living. So I think a new balance needs to be found in that sense. And the last one, I think it's really related to data and data reliability and fair outcomes. So we, as ING, we are in a banking industry, so we need to make sure that our stakeholders, which are ultimately customer, regulator, and the society, receive fair outcomes regardless the way we conduct a business. Today, we don't have sufficient technical standard or sufficient data diversity to inject in our infrastructure to guarantee that the outcome will remain as expected. In that sense, we are really looking with curiosity from one side, but also with a cautious approach. And looking also what the regulator will do in terms of developing a technical standard, whether this will be feasible with the pace of innovation we expect, remain things that we are observing.
So people, pressure, and data.
Right.
Basically. I mean, just to summarize a little bit. Prerna, what about you?
Yeah, I think, of course, these challenges that Luca talked about, but from what I've seen, I think it's really, mindset and the culture that really needs to change. And I think what we've seen is a lot of times people think, we have this analog process and can we now digitize it? And I think that's where a lot of times there is a mismatch in what you should really be thinking. And I think digital transformation, and unlike any other transformation, really is an opportunity to reimagine and rethink anything you're doing in the business today.
And maybe reinvent it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. I mean, if you want to just take, I don't know, we make, and this is a real example, we have a client and we're doing savings tracking in Excel. Can you do it through a digital tool? Can you do this through a digital tool? Now, in that, you cannot go back, unlike Excel, and change the numbers you had last month, right? Yeah. And then you're like, can the technology solve for this? Can you make it customizable? I mean, what's the point, of moving to digital if you just want to take an analog process and do this in a different way? So I think that's probably one of the challenges
But do you think, sorry to interrupt, do you think it's a bit of maybe this misunderstanding of the capabilities of digital technology to solve every problem, right? That it's a magic bullet to solve the problems that we have, which really are probably much more complex in terms of processes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think we heard in the session this morning, it really starts from that vision and clarity of thought on what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go, but also how will you do this? And I think I was reading somewhere that if you were to put, all leaders in an organization together and ask them, what's the definition of digital? They would say very different things. And I think that's perhaps where we start. Do we have a common understanding of digital as a term, if you may?
Yeah. Ralf, what do you think?
First of all, certainly fully agree with what you both said. And I would like to maybe, if I had to pick one out of the many challenges, I would probably call out change management. And I give you an example. A few years ago, we converted at Johnson & Johnson our entire indirect procurement So roughly almost $20 billion of spend of all kinds of stuff, yeah, that we were buying in a pretty traditional way, which meant we had an Ariba system in the background, but then in every location we had buyers performing the purchase job. And we wanted to turn that into what we called an e-marketplace, so fully digitalized environment, where we wanted to drive that most of the things can actually be bought by the requisitioner without any assistance, so no touch. And a few things that are complex would go to the category team, and they figure it out after you, as the requisitioner, have entered kind of what you wanted into the system. And our rollout was really going pretty well, especially considering that it also meant a massive workforce reduction in procurement. But then we were really hitting a big storm in our stakeholder bases, and that was in our R&D community. So here you have to think, well, these are people who are scientists, PhDs, they want to do research, and they were simply saying, I'm not willing to do anything my own in your system. What I needs to get procured by procurement, because my time is needed to make research, for example, to help cancer patients. But that's a very strong argument, right? And then we did engage into deep discussions, and we realized that was a bit their reaction. The real issue was they had not been brought on board before. So we hadn't spent time on that specific stakeholder group at all in terms of change management.
Communication.
Exactly. What do we do? Why do we do it? What's in for you? What's maybe the downside, in a very honest way? And after we then had that really deep dialogue and we first really listened to them, then we found common ground, and 3 months later they were all fine. They wouldn't even remember anymore how it was before. Yeah? But we had so much focused our change management effort on our own procurement community, because we were bringing a team of, call it 2,000 down to 1,500 and all of these aspects, and also change management towards suppliers. We had forgotten about the internal stakeholders. So I really learned change management you almost cannot do enough when you really drive a big transformation. Because whenever you forget an aspect, it becomes a big, big roadblock, and then it distracts the team and could even put a good project totally at risk. Yeah.
So, and what I like about this session is the fact that it's got the words tech and it's got the human. And what I'm hearing here is that there seems to be a very big emphasis from organizations on the tech side of things, and maybe less so on the human side. So probably we have our answer as to why we have so many transformational failures. But I want to go to your point, Luca, because you talk about one of the big issues we have is this pressure to transform quickly, right? I mean, we're in a very difficult trading environment at the moment, right? With constant crisis across multiple things, and yet we have to do this very quickly if we're going to keep the market shares that we have. So what kind of tactics, what kind of strategy would you utilize to maybe fast track some transformational efforts?
Yeah, so as I said, AI is going to be a journey. It's not about implementing a software. So as such, you need to have a long-term view, which requires to have a proper buy-in from your leaderships, because you need to invest and you need to have a long-term planning. I think it's also about experimenting. So I think it's important to identify proper use case when you have a clear definition of the objective you want to achieve, and you have proper metrics and you can monitor and improve. So my suggestion in the sense is stay a little bit with the feet on the ground and identify those use cases that can create an impact and you can scale up. You need to make sure that you have a proper resources within procurement and in your organization, because it's about collaborative, cross-functionally, to make sure that you have the right resource. And I would also say that it's very important to leverage on the market expertise. So you need to find a balance between what you build in-house and what you see in the market, because the innovation will more probably be driven by the market, either market leaders or a new startup. And ultimately, as Ralf will say, you need to think in terms of a tech ecosystem. It's not about plugging a software, it's about thinking in terms of user experience, how you can combine your existing process, which are a combination of human interaction, existing technology, and capability that AI will bring.
And what about listening to the user, whether it's the supplier, whether it's the internal user, and what about failure? I mean, that's sometimes we've been wed to a certain type of technology, and we are going down with that ship, aren't we? Do or die. So how much are we going to be listening to, from the change management perspective, to your point, Ralf, to people around us in the ecosystem to develop something that is actually going to be functioning? Ralf, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it really starts with listening, right?
Yeah.
And in that example that I gave, the one thing that I learned is listening was not what I had in mind first, which is I go to the stakeholder, I give my pitch, and then I expect the person to say, thank you, Ralf. That's not how it works. So listening is actually going there and then to shut up and to really listen to the perspective, try to understand, repeat what you hear, and then really doing the job of coming the way towards the stakeholder or the internal team member to some point. Yeah. So that is important, that people at least feel that, you know, the project team is interested to understand their perspective. That would also make them much easier accept that there will be a change that maybe people find painful, for example. I remember years ago a more classic ERP introduction, and the COE came and said, this is the blueprint, this is what you guys are going to implement, you have 1 year of time. We said, no, that cannot be. We need to now first analyze how we work today. And they said, no, it's irrelevant. The blueprint describes how you will work in the future. And how you work today, you should better forget it immediately.
Wow.
And we were fighting for 3 months. And then they said, look, 2 choices. You can continue to waste your time arguing with us, or you start your work and you implement the way it will be. So they forced it. And we then decided, okay, the clock is ticking, so we will do that. And it was in the end successful because what they bought as a product was really proven within a broader company.
Yeah.
So it's just that we didn't have the experience at that time. So it depends.
And you see that very often. You see that very often in a lot of companies.
Exactly.
Prerna, what's your tips for fast-tracking some of this transformation?
Yeah, I think it kind of links to what both Luca and Ralf are saying. And I think it really, for me, is you have to find that balance between finding use cases or projects that are significant or impactful enough, but also doable in a certain time frame. Like you cannot find the biggest project and then take forever. Like you have to deliver also at the same time. So you have to find that balance between something which is meaningful but also doable in a certain time frame, and then you move to the next thing, you do experimentation and so on and so forth. And I think the second aspect to that is ultimately you have to link the impact or the meaningfulness to broader organizational goals. Like is it for Johnson & Johnson better customer experience? Is it lower unit cost? Because then it's not just procurement, right? What is procurement's objective? It's if you link any of your initiatives to what is the objective for my business as a whole, then at some level you're aligned with your marketing team, your R&D team, or whichever team. So I would say, that's probably what, I'd say a balance between what you pick up, but also align that to broader organization goals. So you're not at, conflict with what procurement's trying to do versus what R&D is trying to do versus, any other function in the business.
So with the 10 minutes we've got left, I want to focus a little bit now on the future, which is, okay, so let's imagine we're going to be here again at DPW 2024. First of all, what's on our plates for this next year? And what are we going to be talking about moving into 2025 and beyond? What's the future look like, especially when it comes to the balance between technology and human to drive transformation forward? Ralf?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have one, let's say, really dream. I have a total team of roughly 150 people. They and I are spending a lot of time finding the data somewhere. Our ERP landscape is very fragmented. So I would love to see the probably AI-driven solution that can really deliver the promise. That is to say, I go into all your many systems, and I don't care that you have way too many, and I am able to extract what you really need to know so that you can focus on your job, which I think, what is our job in procurement? It's creating options, and with a lot of commercial creativity, driving the execution against those options. That's what I would hope AI cannot replace, at least not in the next 10 years. But taking all that time away that I now need to spend on something that I shouldn't, that would be great, yeah.
Well, I like what you say about the promise that AI is meant to be giving us, right? So, Luca, let me go with you then. What do you think we're going to be talking about?
Well, I think we will talk a lot of attempt on AI adoption, probably a lot of failure as well,
yeah,
and some success. I have also dream as Ralf in that sense.
Are you sure it's not nightmares that you wake up to?
Yes, which today are nightmares indeed. I like to mention two. One is, we are dealing with indirect costs, and we are in a regulated industry, so having AI supporting our business owner to conduct in a distributed model procurement activity in compliance manner, giving away various intake form, decision tree, etc. That would be one of my dream, because ensuring compliance indeed is one of the objective. The second one is a capability that getting insights from a contract. So if any of you is familiar with the banking industry, we have every 6 months a regulation that asks us to comply, to introduce new provision in contract, and to demonstrate that, which today consists in reviewing, reanalyzing, reopening contract every 6 months to adjust. So if AI will provide some of this result, that will be certainly
a dream come true.
A dream come true.
Continuing with the whole dream thing.
Exactly.
Prerna, what about you? What do you think we're going to be talking about? What's the next year and the next? I mean, no crystal ball. I'm not going to hold you to to this, but.
So firstly, I want to say that actually, because I do represent a vendor here, I have to say we're kind of working on, the dream that you guys have. But I also want to say that it's not like AI is not that magic bullet, and we're not going to get to what we want to deliver as a business to our customers maybe in a year from now. And I think it's linked to the thought that digital transformation, actually, I think the word transformation is a little bit of a misnomer, right? It's not a one-time activity. I think we're going to be digitally transforming our businesses for the rest of our lives.
More like digital evolution.
It's more like evolution. So I think next year, I think we would be talking about, how generative AI has now probably become more mainstream in some of the use cases, etc. But I really hope we can also talk about what does this mean in terms of the jobs or the talent that we have. And we say, right, it's about augmenting the humans, it's about this and that, but I haven't necessarily seen anything which shows me, okay, how has the role of a category manager been reconfigured in this new paradigm, right? And I haven't yet read a book, but maybe there is one which says, okay, here are the 6 roles in a typical procurement organization, and we know they're not going away. How do we, how does AI make them be more human, make them more emotional, make them have better stakeholder relationships? But I haven't seen, what do they do today or what they've been doing last many years. And now, because you have all this technology, what is a day in a life of a sourcing manager? How is it different? How is it reconfigured using generative AI? So I think hopefully we can talk more about that next year.
Like we were saying, listening. You know, and so the fact that you're saying, and I strategically placed you there in the middle between these two guys to see if we can sort of find a way to listen to some of the issues that they have, right? To drive forward the advancements in technology that we have. We have time for a couple questions if there have been any questions on Slido. I don't know if there are any questions on Slido, or if, yes, no, maybe. Or if there are any questions from the audience. If not, I've got more questions as well. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, great. So then I'll ask some more questions then. So with regards to the issue around human, right? So we talk about technology here. We haven't touched much upon the training and development of humans into the kind of new next iteration of digital transformation, right? So how many organizations do you think in general, or let me rephrase it, do you think organizations in general are spending the kind of resources and planning and time into the development of people into this next generation of transformation initiatives?
Well, no, short answer, no.
Yeah.
I think it's still, we look still with, I said before, curiosity, but we don't have really implementation. We are not addressing the human dimension properly. Mm-hmm. I think, as I said before, it's not about having in a tech department these capabilities. It's about creating a spread workforce towards the organization. Ultimately, if we want to embrace this journey, we need to start talking a different language, and this cannot be just limited to certain functions. So probably if you go in a tech department, these conversations are quite common, but if you go outside of it, this is not happening, and I do not observe any structured plan to develop this.
Now we do have a couple of questions. So what is the right mix of HI and AI in strategic procurement? Who wants to take that? Ralf?
Yeah, happy to take that. I think it really depends on also your call it your category, the characteristic of your spend. Yeah, because what I would typically try to do is to segment, and that would allow you then to say where does each of the angles have a role, and every category is a little bit different. Yeah, some actually will really require that kind of you really own it, and you use digital as an aid, yeah, to help you. And in others, you might really say, I can basically delegate it to the bot and do the job. Yeah, these would be the two extremes, and I think there is space for both.
Yeah, I would agree
Yeah?
with that. Yeah, I mean, if you see categories like office supplies, MRO, even transportation, given the kind of data science capabilities, I think those maybe more AI, but some R&D. Again, because there is a big element of stakeholder there, right? Your stakeholder's not going to trust you if you're going to say the bot's going to do this on the side, right? So I agree.
I would agree 100%. With that. There was a question here about we've heard about the dreams of procurement. What would be the nightmares? I don't think we have time to discuss all the nightmares that could happen in procurement. There's just too many of them. So I want to talk a little bit about okay, what about this question here about startups? I like that. There are a lot of startups present today. What are the learnings on how best to work with startups and innovation from a corporate level? That's a very big disruptive point. I mean, you look at organizations like ING and Johnson & Johnson, a big legacy, long-term businesses with, dare to say it, some bureaucratic processes, some complexity. So how do you guys work more like a startup, and how do you work with startups?
Yeah.
Ralf? Luca?
Yeah, no, we're very short. I think we need to create process to make sure that we are able to onboard startups with different criteria that we utilize today versus market leaders. I mean, we cannot compare them to in terms of size, in maturity, and a risk associated. And I think we need to have a proper way to onboard them, which is something that we need to implement.
In other words, a lot of work needs to be done still. Is there anything you want to add, Prerna?
I've been on the other side, and I think there are two things. One, I agree. I mean, it has to be a different process. You cannot go through this entire legal MSA, and startups, we don't have those. I mean, I'm not in a startup now, but we don't have those sort of resources to do. And I think I understand, especially when you look at banks or Johnson & Johnson, there will be a lot of compliance, regulatory things, but somehow there has to be a way to figure out. But also not then say, okay, then work on these use cases where you can't access my data. You cannot, touch my systems, because then there's a whole InfoSec requirement. I think we have to also do that, because unless you open it up in a real way, make it a real use case which really ties back to business outcomes, it's not going to be successful with that startup. So I think there are these co-creation projects. I've seen some other organizations. I think that's probably the right way, the right infra.
Ralf?
Yeah. One quick aspect to add to that. So a few years ago, I worked with a startup intensively, really interesting new proposition. Lots of time went to it. Then one Sunday night, the CEO calls me and said, Ralf, I need to tell you, we are shutting down the servers. Money is burned. We are really, really sorry. So that was the end of it. Next day in the office, everybody said, oh my God, we wasted all of our time. I said, no, I don't think so, because honestly, not sure how you guys feel. I learned so much when I was working with that startup, so that learning doesn't go away. So that's the attitude I take. Yeah. So I reserve a bit of time for that because I'm really immediately learning from it. And whether it then turns out or not is a different story. Yeah. That's the nature of the startup.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us your dreams and maybe some nightmares as well. And thank you to the audience for being part of this panel. Appreciate it.